Hello everyone, welcome to my Q&A.
Okay, I'm kidding. That is not my voice. Actually, wait, hold on.
Hello everyone, welcome to my Q&A.
Can you imagine if I did this whole video with that and just acted like it was completely normal? Sorry. I guess I should properly explain how this video will proceed. So, I told people to ask me questions about me and this whole Trials of Death thing. Grabbed a bunch from my Discord, grabbed a bunch from my Twitter, and grabbed a bunch from YouTube. Tried going door to door for questions, but that was mostly just met with a lot of, "Who the heck are you?" or "Why are you still in your pajamas?" So I think we'll just stick to the questions I got online. I'll be taking on 100 different questions, and unfortunately for me, none of them are true and false, so I did have to do a bit of studying to make sure I have some idea of how I'm going to answer them. Not even any multiple choice, really, guys. No idea how many takes this will require, but hopefully any cuts won't seem too abrupt or noticeable. But yeah, I think we're good to go. I'll put each question up on screen as I'm answering it, but I'll be reading the questions out loud before answering them anyway, so visually there's nothing you'll miss other than my credit card information that I'll be putting on screen for one frame somewhere in this video. So yeah, enjoy my voice, I guess. What was your reaction during the clear? A lot of people have wondered about this. In fact, even before the clear, people would try and speculate how I would react when the moment came. Because so much time went into this, some people figured I would scream or freak out or something like that. But actually, I can reenact it for you. This is what it was like. Yeah, there was nothing. In terms of not being able to see or hear a reaction from me, you didn't miss out on anything at all. Which is not to say I wasn't, you know, excited. I was just silent and in shock. It was over in an instant and I didn't have time to process it. Though in Twitch chat, you can see me typing "what" in all caps and spamming question marks, but in terms of real life, there wasn't a reaction. I always figured that I wouldn't give a reaction to the clear, and while I was right on that, I didn't realize how difficult it would be to mentally process that it was actually over in the moment. What controller and controls do you use? Alright, easy question. I've always used the standard Wii U gamepad. In fact, without a monitor, I just use the gamepad screen. Y and X and ZR button combo with the control stick. Well, sorry. Let me translate for the Americans. ZR. I've never used the D-pad for this game. Well, not that I've never used it, I just never regularly use it, though I have tried out all the sections with the D-pad before. But control stick's always been my main. Did you ever lose motivation or feel like giving up? Nope, genuinely never. From the moment I finished creating the first draft of the level, I knew I was capable of beating it and I wanted to finish it. Of course, at the time, I had no idea how far I would push the level, but at every step of the way, I was fully motivated to see it through. I didn't care how long it took, and in a certain way, the longer it took, the more motivation I had. So, yeah, I can say that across the entire 7 year journey, I never had any self doubt. I always wanted to keep going. Might not be the most exciting answer, but it really is as simple as that. Will you ever touch Mario Maker 1 again? I think it's pretty likely. Dare I say inevitable. That's not to say here comes another level of the same magnitude again, just simply that I'll probably still mess around with it from time to time. Same with Mario Maker 2. I never really gave that much of my attention, but it's not too late. I mean, Mario Maker 3 could come out and then I'll be like, oh, finally time for Mario Maker 2. But yeah, I'm not the kind of person that retires from specific games. I always come back for more, even if it's later down the line. How did Trials of Death impact my real life, social life, etc.? I really had little to no impact at all. The thing with my whole grind is that it was being timed. The total hours spent were there for everyone to see, and when you start getting into the thousands, especially multiple thousands of hours, it becomes difficult to quantify that time frame in your head. People see the big numbers and just completely fail to distribute them over a long period of time. I've seen so many people miserably criticize me under the idea that I'm some guy locked away in my basement doing almost nothing else in my life. And it's like you just made up that assumption about me and then started complaining about the guy in your assumption. He doesn't even exist. My life isn't like that at all. If you take any regular daily routine activity and put a timer on it, it too will look overwhelming after a long period of time. For example, how many hours of your life have you spent in the shower? Well, I guess for some of you, maybe not a whole lot. But for the average person, that's going to be a lot of hours. How many hours spent driving? Spent watching videos? Spent being a worthless parasite online, being rude about what other people do with their spare time? I think that last one actually might add up quite a bit for some people out there. Now, nothing against anyone that asked this question, by the way. It's totally fair and valid one. I just didn't have an exciting answer for it, so I used my opportunity to go on a mini rant. But yes, I wouldn't say Trials of Death had any impact on my social life at all. Who was the person you least expected to react to the clear? I think I have two different answers for this one, and neither of them are big names or media outlets or anything like that, just personal surprises. The first one requires a bit of a backstory for the full context to it. So, in late 2016, back in what can definitely still be considered the early era of the level, I was living away from home at school. My roommate was kind of my main friend there, but he was a pretty social guy and had several other friends from his own classes, so by his extension, I kind of had these other friends I would see through being around him. My level was just starting to become bigger news at this point, with one of the first articles on it being published during this time, so they all knew about my level. Now, jumping ahead to the end of the semester, and everyone is going home, except that I wasn't coming back, I was switching out of my program to eventually go to a different school, and on one of my last days before leaving, maybe even the day before, this one friend wished me good luck on my level and to let them know when I completed it. It was a nice, wholesome send off. Now, ever since I had always remained in touch with my former roommate, but all the extended friends weren't people I was close with, or would have even known how to contact for that matter. But a day or two after I cleared the level, I got a DM on Twitter from someone I didn't recognize. Turns out it was from the one that gave me that send off all those years ago, and that the news had naturally reached them. My other answer to this question happened just the other day. In fact, if I hadn't procrastinated on these questions so much, I wouldn't have had the chance to include this. Somewhat of an answer in the same vein, but back in the Mario Maker 1 days, there was a Japanese player that went by the name Samura. Eventually, they ended up moving on from the game. In fact, I'm not sure if they were even involved with Mario Maker 2. They may have left before that. They deactivated their Twitter, Discord, YouTube, and I guess the social media in general that they used for Mario Maker. But wouldn't you know, the news of my completion still managed to reach them, and so suddenly I got another surprise Twitter DM from Samura, who had made a new account just to come back and congratulate me. So yeah, those were definitely the two biggest welcome surprises to me. Oh, and also one from Joe Biden. Some people have expressed disappointment that they couldn't see or hear my celebration after the clear. What motivated you to keeping the camera and mic off all these years? Okay, so yeah, I already covered the reaction, or I guess lack thereof, but as for why I just barely ever streamed with a mic, short answer, I just didn't really feel like it. It's not that I wouldn't have been capable of commentating and playing at the same time. The few occasions that I actually did, I had no trouble with. It's hard to pinpoint an explanation for why I didn't use a mic, but it could probably be explained by just be wanting to be able to do my own thing without having to interact. Of course, people were always there still watching and talking in chat, and I would regularly contribute to the chat between occasional attempts, but I could pretty easily disassociate just through the fact that nobody was expecting me to talk. It made the streaming aspect of attempts easier in the sense that I didn't have to concern myself with the fact that I was even streaming. How many of the 1250 free ketchup packets do you still have after clearing the level? Alright. Some of you know about this, but I'm sure many don't, so I'll give the background story. A lot of McDonald's now have those ordering machines where you can go through the menu and customize your order. As it turns out, ketchup packets are free, so no matter how many you order, they're still free. Now, on these machines, you can't manually type anything in. To add another ketchup packet, you have to hit the plus button to add one at a time. And you can't hold it down either. You actually have to tap it each time. So I just stood there and manually pressed it 1,250 times to add it to my order. Now, I wasn't actually expecting them to give it to me. I just thought it would be funny to see that go through in my order. But this was a fairly new McDonald's with new staff, and I don't think they were trained for this. I guess they didn't have a handbook that told you what to do if a ketchup maniac showed up. Honestly, I bet those Walmart adjacent McDonald's have protocols for situations like this. But not this one. This one, they didn't know what to do. So they actually just handed me a giant bag of ketchup, and while I don't know how many I have left, I can confirm that the stash has not yet been depleted. Do you think you played better with some songs compared to others? I've actually seen people wonder about this during streams before, but I would say no. It didn't matter if some hype song was playing or not. Wouldn't get me to play any better or any worse. maybe the placebo effects would have worked if I didn't accidentally recognize them as being placebo in the first place. Anyway, let's move on to the 10th question here. Can this be the 9th question? No. What called for you to make this? There were a lot of questions about what got me into Mario Maker, what got me into Kaizo, what's wrong with you. So I'm just going to kind of generalize them all into this one question here. So we have to jump back in time even before Mario Maker to really track this one down. I think we can trace it back to the late 2000s during the height of Flash games. When I would go online as a kid, I loved playing various Flash games. Doesn't matter if you're a little older or a little younger than me, if you grew up anywhere in this area, you knew Flash games were a big thing. And now, since I also liked Mario games, I decided to see if there were Mario Flash games, and sure enough, there were tons. Anyone ever stumble across Super Mario Rampage as a kid, where Mario just plows through his enemies with a shotgun? Yeah, I wasn't expecting to see that. But anyways, my favorite was a game that was literally just called Super Mario Flash. Mario Dress Up was a close second, but Super Mario Flash had some main story mode where you could go through boring levels or whatever. But its main feature was that it had a level editor.
This whole game was
In the theme of Super Mario Bros. 1, specifically the Super Mario All-Stars version of it. So there wasn't a lot of crazy tricks you could do in terms of making difficult levels, but you could still make some tough levels with that editor, and that's exactly what I did. I would design my levels with crazy fire bars, tight jumps. Even Hammer Bros were a favorite of mine back then. Nobody liked Hammer Bros, so you can trace my insanity back to liking Hammer Bros as a kid. Either that or Super Mario Rampage did a number on me. But I used to spend hours on that game stomping Koopas, and just generally making tough levels for myself to try and get through. Now, flash forward years later, and Nintendo announces Super Mario Maker. I was excited for this right away. I don't even remember how they first announced this game. Miyamoto probably just walked on screen and just said Mario Maker, and by that point I was just saying, I'm buying this game, I'm buying this game. Meanwhile, they haven't even shown a single bit of information on the game. Average Nintendo fan. Now, of course, one of the main highlights and selling points for the game, apart from being able to make your own levels, was that you could share them and play other people's levels. And honestly, I didn't even care about that. It seemed like an obvious inclusion to the game, but that wasn't at all what hooked me. It was literally just kind of a bonus for me. All I cared about was that I was going to be able to make hard levels for myself to try and get through. So launch day comes around, and I get the game day one, of course. I start getting used to the game like everyone else, make some of my own levels, make a hard level, make a level harder than that, then make a level harder than that, repeat this process a few times until we get Trials of Death. The cycle didn't even have to end here. When I first started making it, I wasn't thinking, this is going to be my hardest level. It was just, this is going to be my hardest level so far, as had been the case with each previous level. But as I was playing it, that finally started to change. I was ready to put all my eggs in one basket and really just keep pushing the level to its limits. It was like I wanted to keep making my next new hardest level, but instead every next new hardest level was still the same level. It was still Trials of Death all the way up to the end. Making the hardest level in the game was just a byproduct of me making the hardest level for myself. And I missed the opportunity to call it Super Mario Rampage. What was the most annoying or saddest death? I've had too many different deaths everywhere to try and recall them all, but one of the most, I guess, iconic deaths I had came from the very early days of the level. I was fairly far into the level, and while I don't usually pause in random spots during attempts, I happened to pause on this one. And while paused, I noticed a smudge in the gamepad screen, so I instinctively went to wipe the screen. And the exact moment I reached for it is when I saw a disaster coming, but it was already too late. The smudge was right over top of the start over button, and I ended up hitting it. As far as genuinely annoying deaths go, though, there's not really a specific way for things to go wrong that annoys me. I guess maybe there was that time I lost the run to a power outage. I was still in the first section of the level, so I didn't lose out on a good run or anything, but it's a power outage, so it's automatically just annoying. What trick or mechanic of the level are you most worried will be misunderstood or you would like to clarify? Okay, so for this question, you might expect me to talk about some elaborate section viewers might not understand or something intricate or something like that, but I actually want to talk about the firewalk for this. The part right before the final section when you're just walking slowly between the fire potaboos. Some people see it and think, wait, isn't that kind of easy? The answer is yes, it is easy. It's not meant to be a real section of the level. The history of it is that originally there was nothing there and you just had to run down the hallway sort of area to the pipe. But then I thought, well, it's leading up to the final section, so I should give it some sort of build up. So I added the tracks and originally just put regular blocks that would auto scroll Mario along it to the end. But then after that, while essentially still keeping that idea, I figured I might as well change the blocks to fire just to add that element of danger. So, despite the fact that, yes, in theory, you can mess up and die to that spot, it was never meant to be difficult. It's just slow suspense. Are there any parts of the level that I wish I had buffed? The only regret, if you can even call it that, is that I would have liked to have finished the level with under 10 seconds to spare, maybe even under 5, but it's not like I could fit in a whole new section, so that probably would have only been achieved by some arbitrary extension somewhere. So, not a huge deal, but I guess that's the closest thing I can give to an answer to that. Which buff was the first, and which buff are you most proud of? It's hard to recall what would technically be the first buff. Actually, one of the first buffs would technically be the P-Switch physics update that rolled out in the beginning of 2016. So, in the early days of Mario Maker, Nintendo would occasionally just send out random updates to the game, usually to patch out glitches and such. But every time, there was always some random side effects of these patches, and arguably the most infamous example of that was what happened to P-Switches in very early 2016. P-Switches became harder to jump off of in the air, and by a very notable amount. And since my level had P-Switch jumps, Nintendo basically just sent out a buff to my level. Literally, Nintendo started buffing my level before I did. I kind of liked it. Everyone referred to them now as new P-Switch jumps or new P-Switch physics. And like 3 years later, people still refer to them as that out of habit. It's like, guys, they're not new anymore. I think we can just call them P-Switches at this point. We've had these physics for like 90% of the game's history. But as far as the buff I'm most proud of, I feel like I could list a few, but I'm going to give the cop out answer and just say the buff at the very end of the level with the shells, where right before I do the last midair, you have to like bounce on the one shell and grab the other shell. It was essentially the last buff I added to the level, and fittingly right at the finale. The reason it's kind of a cop out answer is because at any point, whatever the most recent buff was would probably have been my answer. What is the hardest section? There are actually kind of two different ways I could categorize a hardest section, one being hardest to be consistent at and the other being hardest to learn. So for a consistency example, the Thwomp Shell Jump was pretty notorious for stopping a lot of runs. There were a lot of days, even right up to the clear, where my consistency on it would be quite low. It was tough to hit consistently, but in terms of learning that section, there's not much to learn. Someone familiar with Kaizo could manage to pull it off once without having to learn anything specific. They wouldn't start out consistent, but managing it the first time could happen just through luck alone. Now, take a section like the bomb area before the subworld. After enough time, I was actually quite consistent at that whole sequence. But to learn it for the first time, it's obviously much more complex than the Thwomp Shell Jump, and not something someone could immediately throw themselves into and find success with. It's been so long since I've had to learn anything from the ground up that I honestly don't even know for myself what the hardest sections to learn would be. At some point, though, I plan on making an analysis video going over each of the sections, so we might be able to dig a little deeper into this question when I do that. How tedious was it to calibrate all these jumps to be extremely precise but still possible? A lot of trial and error goes into the creation and adjustment process of making the level, but honestly, sometimes things just fall into place naturally. It could be tedious at times trying to make things work, but it was always rewarding. So, I can't say it wasn't tedious, but it was unenjoyable tedious, well, unless that's kind of an oxymoron. Okay, yeah, actually, what's the exact definition of tedious? Hold on here. Okay, yeah, that was an oxymoron. But you know what? I stand by it. It was an enjoyable tedious. What was your favorite and least favorite part of the level? I feel like I could name several parts as my favorite, but that would kind of defeat the purpose of this question if I just started naming a bunch. Most of my choices would probably match the popular ones that other people consider their favorite parts as well. However, I will say one of my favorite parts that I think is underrated is the part that's known as Final 3. I guess a lot of you might not know what Final 3 is. It's the part pretty close to the end where you're just on the bomb and surfing left and right and avoiding the fire. I hope that wasn't a terrible explanation. If it was, I'm sorry, but that's the part I'm talking about. You have no idea, but whatever. Uh, as for my least favorite, that would have to be some of the slower transitional parts that bridge one section to the next. Things that I wouldn't even really consider sections, but are just inevitably necessary to fit the level together. So think portions like where you have to grab the items after the bomb lapse portion before getting to the survival room, though they very much are necessary for the whole bomb lapse sequence to even work and have a purpose at all. So I know, I guess they're kind of the unsung heroes of the level, but yeah, they're the most downtime. What would you tell yourself 7 years ago if there was a time travel portal and you saw yourself? I'm going to assume this has to be in relation to the level, otherwise, I would warn myself that they're going to discontinue the vanilla Frosties at Wendy's all across Canada. Like, seriously, it's literally the default flavor. How do they not have it anymore? But yeah, in regards to the level, well, I wouldn't want to say anything so as not to alter the timeline, but ignoring pointless hypotheticals, I'd probably tell myself to collect screenshots of people doubting me. Yeah, glad I listened, and thank you for that question. I was wondering who that guy was 7 years ago. He did kind of look like me. Trials of Death 2 when? Alright, look, even if I ever make a crazy hard level again, I don't think I would call it Trials of Death 2. I don't think it could live up to what the original was. Film industry loves to make underwhelming sequels to classics, and I won't fall down that path. Probably. How does it feel having your community grow so much, and how that and Trials of Death have impacted so many people's lives? Don't care. Next question. No, kidding. It's definitely been far and away the most fulfilling part about all this. It's honestly hard to imagine not having a lot of the friends I've made as a direct result of this. I even have a sort of spin off community where a few years ago I created something known as the Caption Survival Competition. It's basically this competition where people anonymously send in their best caption ideas for different images, and then everyone votes on their favorites. And if you don't do well for that round, you lose lives through a health based system until eventually you get eliminated, and it keeps going until one person is left. There's been several seasons of that, and it's been a lot of fun. And the entire reason I came up with that idea and went through with it was because I already had my own community and own following, so I knew I could get a bunch of people on board for it and make it work. And there are still a bunch of people there that came from my original community, but that place went down its own path, and over the seasons, lots of people have joined that competition without knowing who I was. I hosted the first couple of seasons, but I eventually let someone else take over as the host and started being a participant of the game myself. Couldn't stand to watch anymore. I had to step in and show them how it's done. But seriously, it's been a lot of great fun meeting so many people and friends. It's a big reason why the waste of time comments are just so annoying. Like, all I'm saying is that if a fly landed on the faces of these people, I would not hesitate to use a fly swatter. Where does the love for chain chomps come from? The heart. It comes from the heart. Well, the origin story isn't all that exciting. When I was younger and would have to make some account name to sign up for something, I would just think of some Mario character. But I didn't want to be super generic and go with Mario or Luigi or one of the main ones. So I was just kind of like, Chain Chomp, sure. They weren't even specifically my favorite character or anything originally, but eventually, just through using the name, they naturally became my favorite. Kind of a backward situation. I didn't name myself that because they were my favorite. They became my favorite because I named myself that. Why stop grinding Trials of Death? I beat the level. I know it was a popular comparison for Sisyphus, but I did in fact have an end goal. If you had known how long it would take from the start, would you have still done the grind? If I knew everything that would come with it, then certainly yeah. I don't think I would be locked into it. If I wanted to stop, I could just stop. There were a few occasions where people would throw the term sunk cost fallacy at me, and oh my god, I hated hearing that so much. You can't just determine an example of sunk cost fallacy on behalf of someone else. The idea that I was pushing to finish the level because I had already invested a bunch of time into it was completely false. I think one of the best examples of sunk cost fallacy is when someone buys food or orders a meal or whatever, and halfway through eating it, they become really full. Then they're like, oh, I'm so full, but I did pay for this, so I guess I better keep eating it. That would be sunk cost fallacy. But in my case, it's like I was eating my meal and people were just going, sunk cost fallacy, sunk cost fallacy. And it's like, no, I'm just still hungry. Anyways, another question that turned into one of my rants. If you had the choice, would you do it again? If you mean going back in time, having the choice to do it again, or taking a different path in life, then yeah, absolutely, I'd do it again. I most definitely do not regret this. Best question asked? Unfortunately, not this one. Do you think the level could be made even crazier than it already is and still be completed? I mean, yeah, you could just put some random extra spike somewhere in the level, and even if it was completely arbitrary, it would still technically be more difficult by a minuscule amount. There's no finite cutoff point. It's like wondering if someone could ever be taller than the tallest recorded person, 8 foot 11.1, by the way. It's like, yeah, there's no hard cutoff there. A human could theoretically go past that. Same with this level. I didn't magically find the exact maximum possible difficulty. This probably isn't at all the kind of answer you wanted for this question, and I took it too literally, but hey, it's still my answer. Did you have another estimate after hitting 500 hours? Nope. That was around the turning point where I really knew I wanted to keep pushing the level, so I never had any real estimate. My only estimate was a long time. Did you ever expect it would take this long? Yeah, from the moment I placed the first block, I said to myself, I bet this will take me 2,491 days. What are your thoughts on people that say various person could beat this level in 2 days? 50% of the time they're jokes, 50% of the time they're actually said through delusion, 100% of the time they're annoying. Would you have moved the level to Mario Maker 2 if it had the same physics? Honestly, still no. When Mario Maker 2 was announced and we didn't yet know about the physics differences, I still said in advance that I wouldn't port it, and that's entirely because I wanted to keep playing it with the gamepad. What do you think of Critical covering your level and story? I'm really glad he did. I honestly even had a feeling he would just because it seemed like the kind of thing he would want to talk about. I assume he found out about it through some mutual like making it show up on his Twitter feed or something, because that's where he messaged me asking if he could make a quick video on it. And he's the exact kind of guy I would have wanted to give it some attention because he usually gets his basic facts right. For example, he knew I was also the creator of the level. Now, that might sound like a pretty low bar, but I am constantly astonished by how often I see people not knowing I'm the creator of the level. I see comments sometimes that say things like, "What's even more impressive is the guy that designed it." Sure, nice compliment. I'll pass it on to him. Literally, even on the clear video, I think I remember a comment saying something like, well, technically, this would be the second clear because the guy that made it had to beat it. And it's like, how do you not realize that's still me? Like, that should be a very obvious takeaway from the video. But really, with him covering the story, the great thing about it is that the people that were interested in this were the ones that would come over to check out my video on it. It was like a filter resulting in mostly positive comments because most of the dumb ones wouldn't have made it past his own video on it. The minority of dumb people that did specifically come over to leave bad comments ended up just embarrassing themselves in front of everyone else over here that was celebrating over top of them. Obviously, Trials of Death is far and away the hardest level, but is there a way you can try to visualize how hard it actually is so that we can have somewhat of a grasp? So yeah, I do want to make that analysis video on the level soon, and I'll try and go over some of the hidden difficulties of it in that video. Hopefully it'll both be for a general audience that doesn't know as much about the level or even hard Mario Maker levels in general, but it should also be fairly in-depth for those already familiar. It's funny because whenever anyone spends time playing a Kaizo level, they'll almost always tell people that the level is harder than it looks, and that's usually always true. Even when you're familiar with Kaizo levels, most levels tend to be at least a little bit harder than they look, and that's certainly no exception with Trials of Death. With how long it is, I would say that's probably even an amplified trait. But to just give a complete generalization of how difficult the level is, whatever your skill level is at the game, just picture a level that's too hard for you to beat, and then playing it until you beat the level anyway. Do you think it's possible that someone else will beat Trials of Death in the future? Well, hold on for a moment there. I had an entire section in my video dedicated to calling out people that said I would never clear it. I ain't falling for this trap, not setting myself up to appear as a doubter for someone else. So yes, of course someone else will clear this. In fact, let me just cover all my bases here. Everyone is going to clear this level. There we go. I'm safe now. Do you have any aspirations to make streaming or YouTube a full-time job? Absolutely not. I mean, unless I was of the insanely popular level where there were enough people throwing money my way all the time, but that's not at all realistic. It just seems too stressful to have your main income be completely inconsistent from month to month and to have to rely on everyone. I certainly appreciate when people subscribe to me on Twitch, but I would never want to put myself in a position where I would have to expect people to do so. Plus, Twitch and YouTube are both horrible platforms towards their creators. I swear, they're both constantly trying to one up each other on who can make the next horrible decision. Every time the ball is in their court, they could just do nothing and win, but instead they just chuck it into the crowd and hit spectators in the face or something. So yeah, I'm happy with this just being a hobby. Also, don't forget to use your Twitch Prime on me, even though I haven't streamed anything in a few weeks. Do my IRL friends and family know about this? Since very early on, yeah. My closest group of friends obviously knew about the whole thing, but so did my family. My sister, parents, cousins, even my grandparents were really excited about the clear. They loved the clear video. That means if you said something rude about me that was shown in the video, my grandparents saw it. Probably the last people you would want finding out about it, because you don't mess with grandchildren. Might be time to start sleeping with one eye open, Snaggy. Which section took the most practice, apart from the ending? Hold on a moment, you can't discount the ending from this question. I never said that took the most practice. Although, honestly, I don't really have an exact answer for this question, but in general, the whole Final Four sequence was probably where I spent the most time in Editor, just for the sake of preparation for real attempts. I mean, most of the early sections in the level weren't things I needed to practice as much since I did them more often in real attempts. What do you think is the current greatest gaming achievement? The creation of Breath of the Wild. How stressed did you feel during the clear attempt, and how did having died there on the previous day make you feel? Yeah, some people that weren't keeping up with the whole journey might not have heard about this, but I actually died in the last shell section on the previous day before the clear. It wasn't the first time I died there, but for perspective, it usually takes many months for me to get another run to the final section. I wouldn't have been surprised if I hadn't made it back to the last area until next year, so managing it the very next day was absurd. I wasn't stressed at all, though. I just felt like I was getting a chance to immediately avenge that attempt. My only real goal in my mind in that moment was to make it farther in the last section this time, which, I mean, technically, yeah, I achieved that. What session made you the most angry? Nothing about attempts ever made me angry. I really just naturally had the ideal mindset for this whole thing. Someone that rages over attempts probably couldn't have pulled through in the end. The only real source of frustration would be if annoying people were coming into my streaming being rude. I mean, that's not really what this question is about, but that's really the only way I can answer it. How much shorter or longer do you think it would have taken if I had played more per day? Well, the naive answer here would be to say that if I played 24 hours a day nonstop, then I would have been able to finish it in half a year, but somehow I don't think it would have worked like that. If, though, I had played it twice as frequently, or if my sessions were twice as long, could I have finished it in half the amount of real time? Maybe, maybe not. I can see either scenario. One where I'm getting more attempts in, so naturally I reach the final attempt quicker, but also one where I'm just falling into dead end sessions and doubling the length of it, achieving an equal amount of nothing. So I can genuinely see either scenario, but I don't know for sure. All I know was that I was content with the frequency at which I played, and hey, it got me all the way to the end. Ever fail a midair? Absolutely not! I managed the entire 4,370 hours without ever messing up a single midair shell jump. It's true, ask my viewers. Probably would have quit the entire thing out of pure shame if I ever did mess one up. What was the most daunting buff you had created? A lot of times buffs would come in when I was getting better at certain things, so they were almost just results of my improvements with the level, but occasionally there would be a buff that, in my mind, would feel like a genuine setback. A few examples would be something like the 7th red coin, the one right after the halfway point where you put that spring in the spike pit. I eventually got quite good at that, but for a while it was pretty intimidating. There were also times where I would have thoughts like, for example, at the triple P-switch jump, what if I put a spike ceiling at the top of that? Wow, that sounds like a horrible idea. Let's do it. And with every single buff I added, there was no turning back for me. Once it was in, it was there to stay, and I was committed to that rule I made. I never thought, well, if it gives too much trouble, I can remove it. Instead, it was like, well, if it gives me too much trouble, I don't know, tough luck, deal with it. You're the one that buffed it. By the way, that is not advice for people that want to make hard levels. It's just, it worked for me. It's how I wanted to do things. The only ever exception to this, and it was only a temporary exception, was when I made the Thwomp shell jump tighter by lowering the spike on it. It was killing a lot of runs, and I wanted to keep it, but the problem was that because it was killing so many early runs, I wasn't getting to grow my consistency as much on the sections that came after it. So I came up with the idea of temporarily turning that spike into a coin. It was a way of practicing that buff without it stopping runs when I messed it up. The coin and spike hitboxes being more or less the same meant that if I collected the coin, I would have died to the spike, but I got to continue the attempt anyway. And eventually, when I found myself avoiding the coin consistently enough, I reverted it back into being the spike. Do you have any favorite Mario Maker tech that you couldn't implement in the level or perhaps would have used in an alternate universe? This might be an underwhelming answer, but maybe just a Yoshi shell jump. They're not hard to do, but they're satisfying. Are you a virgin? First of all, really weird thing to ask somebody in a Q&A, but I'm asexual, and so the reason I'm even including this question in the first place is just because of how funny the times are when random people would make the typical comment of something like, wow, this guy is definitely going to die a virgin, and it's like, yeah, well, that's the goal. There couldn't have been a less effective way of trying to insult me. Sex is weird and gross. Sex never, Mario forever. Gonna pass that motto down to my kids. Have you ever been publicly recognized? Not by just seeing me, but it has come up in conversation where someone would say, oh, you're that guy. So, yeah, I am pretty known for being the guy that got 1,250 ketchup packs from McDonald's. Favorite song that's not on the playlist? I don't know, but if I could put the entire Attack on Titan soundtrack in the playlist, I would. I mean, I guess there was nothing stopping me from doing that, but I did want some level of variety, and that would have accounted for like 11 hours worth. Has chat and a dedicated fan base made beating Trials of Death more or less stressful of a challenge? I guess having a lot of people know about it did add the stress of feeling like I had to manage expectations. So I guess technically it was more stressful, but by a pretty insignificant amount. It certainly made it more enjoyable and rewarding, though. What was the most annoying thing during the grind? Judgmental, awful, and rude people. I know everyone comes across people like that, but I just feel like the whole concept of what I was doing in particular was a magnet for some of them. I hate those people. Oh, but hate is a strong word. Yeah, I know, that's why I'm using it. I absolutely hate them. I want to be like the light Yagami of YouTube comments. You have to have a person's username and profile picture in mind, and in 40 seconds their account gets deleted. About how much more difficult is the final version of the level compared to its first form? I wouldn't even know how to estimate that, just a lot, a very significant amount. I could go back and clear the earliest draft with no effort at this point. That being said, I never went back to play earlier versions. I wanted my first time clearing the level to be the fully buffed version. If you hadn't had that early death at the end of the level in 2016 that inspired the big wave of buffs, what do you think your legacy would have been? I think I just would have gone on to make a harder level, and that probably would have been the one to turn into the extremely long grind. But I'm glad that didn't happen and that Trials of Death got to be evolved into being that level. If for no other reason than the fact that it meant this whole level evolved through the entirety of the game since shortly after it came out. What's your favorite Mario Maker 1 or 2 level that you had no role in the creation of? Well, let's see. I remember Samura had that level called Braden Awesome. I may have had some influence in helping him come up with a name for it, but otherwise I had nothing to do with the actual creation of it. So yeah, surely it's got to be that one. I don't even remember much about it, but yeah, that was the best one. Is there an empty hole in your soul now that the level is over? Actually, it just got the X-ray results back the other day, and it turns out I don't have a soul. I traded that in some time ago. But yes, it definitely feels weird that the journey just ended all of a sudden. How much attention did you pay to chat while streaming, and did you ever die due to chat or sub notifications? Even when I wasn't responding, I usually kept up with chat. There are enough door and pipe transition screens that I can glance over frequently enough without falling behind, and of course, starting over between attempts too. Sub notifications or other alerts never distracted or messed me up though. A lot of times, people would save their subscription renewal notifications for when I was on a good run, presumably to have it be there in the highlight in case it was a clear, but even then, they never distracted me or anything. Though I do find it quite funny that on the actual clear attempt, there wasn't a single alert of any kind during the entire run. Another thing is that sometimes I would see a really dumb or just incorrect message in chat, and I would just think to myself, oh my god, I need to hurry up and die on this run so I can respond to that message. That didn't happen too often, but I remember this one time someone in chat asked the question of how I was able to keep doing this for so long without getting tired of it or something along those lines, and They happened to ask this near the beginning of a run that went fairly far, so without me having a chance to answer, this other person in chat decided to answer on my behalf, and then they went on this explanation about autism. And I'm not talking about someone trying to be rude or troll. They genuinely just came to this conclusion on their own and thought they were being insightful. And it's like, no, it's not how this works at all. I'm not autistic, and even if I was, you couldn't just come to that conclusion through the fact that I'm playing a level for a long time. It's such a dumb generalization. And I think I managed to survive a few minutes into the level during that, so I was glad when I died and could respond. I'm surprised I didn't just throw myself into some spikes on purpose. And even already on the Clear video, I saw a comment that just said, "Holy autism." Like, shut up! I get it. I get it. There can be correlations. But someone having autism is not that black and white. You see it all the time on speedrunning related things. Random people just saying, autism, autism. Maybe instead of trying to diagnose people over the internet, these people should for once look inward and give a self diagnosis of having a case of stupid. Next question. Did your hands or fingers ever hurt or get sore? Nope, never. I've never had any kind of strain or pain in my wrists or hands or anything like that. I could have gone for an entire day if I wanted. My hands wouldn't feel any different. The only game that I've ever experienced any kind of soreness from was in the joints of my fingers through Mania games like Osu Mania. But even that was just kind of an endurance thing that I pushed through until they got used to it, and it wasn't an issue afterwards. Probably not good advice, but it worked for me. Was there ever a combination of depression, real life, idiots on the internet, etc., that made you question whether or not it was worth it? If so, what made you decide to pull through? And if not, do you feel like having the grind helped or hindered overall? So, this whole grind spanned going off to school, working at a couple different jobs, paying to go back to school again somewhere else, graduating, which is all to say, going through the very relatable young adult situation of, I have no idea what the heck I'm doing, which I'm sure many of you either have experienced, are experiencing right now, or for the younger ones, will get to experience soon. But throughout all the changes and unknowns, the level and community was a consistent thing for me. I could just hop on and do some attempts and temporarily not have to concern myself with anything else. I could just use it as a distraction from anything. And that's not to say every time I played it was for the sake of using it as a distraction. I mean, the majority of times would have been having a fine day and wanted to play just because I actually wanted to play it. But yeah, overall it was a nice thing to have. Have you touched the level again since the clear? I have not yet. I still want to do another attempt just because that would be my one and only chance to see how far I could get twice in a row. But at the same time, I really like the idea of my most recent run having been the finishing run. Whenever people would ask me when I thought I would beat the level, I would always just tell them on the last attempt. And my prediction was correct, so I'm not quite ready to ruin that yet. I've spent so long with the level that it's probably pretty close to riding a bike at this point. I think it would take quite a long time for me to lose a significant portion of my muscle memory with it, though I actually would kind of like that if I did. I think it would be cool to go back to the level, trying it out, and then just thinking, how the heck did I ever manage to pull this whole thing off? What was the biggest change in your life over the course of attempting Trials of Death? Are you ready for this answer? Finishing it. Seriously, I feel like there are certain significant moments in people's lives where you can divide them into simply before and after. Things like maybe a wedding or starting a dream job. And for me, the end of this journey absolutely feels like a before and after moment. Although I guess maybe you could say the same thing for when I started it. But either way, I'm in new territory now. How do you feel about your increase in fans and overall popularity spike since beating the level? And do you have any fear that fans will begin to have very high expectations of all your future streams after clearing such a monumental feat? The clear was definitely a lot of people coming together to celebrate, but I wouldn't say I had any kind of rapid growth in popularity. Some new people have definitely discovered me after finishing my level, and my YouTube following has doubled, but I mean, I've never really done much with YouTube, so that was kind of to be expected since I actually used it for the clear video. I think I've gained about 700 or so followers on Twitch since the clear, so currently almost 95% of my Twitch followers were already there before I beat the level. I feel like I'm giving some kind of business marketing presentation. I don't know. All I'm saying is I don't feel like I have to manage any kind of new expectations for myself, and if other people have high expectations for me, well, good. What would you be doing right now if Mario Maker never existed? Probably playing Mario Maker 2 and wondering why the number 2 was in the title. What were your favorite and least favorite parts of the 7-year journey? If this counts, I want to say premiering the clear video on Twitch the week after I cleared. I mean, I cleared it live, but the clear video stream almost felt even more special. It really felt like a culmination of everything coming to an end. Ahead of time, I was hoping that there would be a few hundred people there for the premiere, and it ended up actually peaking at 800 people being there for it. It's a little ironic that my favorite moment on stream was a pre-made video, but still, the enjoyment and celebration in chat was all live in the moment. As for my least favorite moment, I'm not sure, but the fact that nothing immediately jumps out is probably a good thing. Maybe anytime Snaggy opened his mouth, we'll go with that. First thing you ate after the clear. I actually cleared the level right around the time I would have gone on to eat dinner, but the overwhelming clear kind of took over for the rest of the night, so I don't think I ate anything until close to midnight when I had a banana. No, wait, no. That's not true. I did the second stream in the evening where we played back the clear, and I had a granola bar before going live then. So yeah, I guess a granola bar. What do you plan to do in the future? I'm going to take this question as though it's asking about streaming. I have plans, but not specific plans. This definitely wasn't the last of me streaming. I still have some Super Monkey Ball speedrun stuff I'd like to come back to. Of course, there's Wind Waker with my feet that's been teased for a while at this point, and it feels inevitable that we'll see more Mario Maker from me at some point. Maybe even casual stuff, who knows? Did you do the donut speed tech before the fire walk on your successful attempt? So, for those that don't know, when there's a stack of donut blocks, if you hold left or right against a wall while you're slowly descending down them, you can collectively save one frame. But no, I did not save that single frame there. I guess my run was unoptimal. Maybe I should go again. How much do you think you've improved in Mario overall by playing the level? Going to assume this is for Mario Maker specifically, but yeah, I don't know. That's kind of difficult to answer. I was focused mainly on my own level rather than the game as a whole, but my abilities with my own level can certainly carry over to other levels. Gradually improving at my level could be a reflection of gradually improving at the game in general, but it's not really an answer I can just quantify. Do you have any favorite songs that came on in your playlist while playing? Yes, The Rumbling. I am actually so ecstatic that that was the song I cleared to. Well, technically it ended like 15 seconds before I cleared it, but I think I can count that. The Sun Rises was a great song for the first one after the clear too. Everything just came together really well in the moment. Do you plan to make Trails of Death Super Mario Maker 2 version? What is Trails of Death? I'm not familiar with anything called Trails of Death, so sorry, I can't answer this. Have you seen the fan Super Mario Maker 1 servers, and will you upload the cleared level to that if you're able to? Hey! Have you seen my clear video? You just skip through and only watch certain parts of it? Unbelievable. But yes, I mentioned that towards the end of it. Who will accept Trials of Death for viewer levels? Hey, if you can find a Mario Maker 1 viewer level streamer still out there, I'm sure they'll take anything at this point. Who came up with referring to the blue spike top as Phil? Me. I did. There was a small clan of people trying to rebel and name him Roger, but we managed to exile them. His name is Phil because he fills in the space by the pipe. Did you have any crazy dreams after the clear or any type of feeling when you woke up the next day? No dreams. I've had a lot of dreams of playing the level in the past, a lot of them involving clearing it, and they always felt so weird, but I've yet to dream about the level since clearing. Waking up the next day was just being overwhelmed by all of my notifications still. That lasted nonstop for a couple days. What was the craziest thing that happened to you after the clear? I think the amount of positive messages I received was the craziest thing to me. I mean, I can't pretend to be surprised by the fact that a lot of people were hyped about it, but the personal messages crafted specifically to me, there were a lot of them, and I appreciated all of them. Did at any point after the clear you say, first try? I was too shocked at first, but after a few minutes in chat replay, you can see me say, too easy. Did you eat the cookies? This is referring to the video I had posted the day before I got the clear, and I hate to shatter the illusion, but I didn't actually bake those cookies. They were store-bought, and they were actually getting somewhat stale by that point. So, yeah, no, I didn't end up eating those particular ones. Are you sad that Pepsi Man wasn't the song during the clear? No, it would have been too much to handle if Pepsi Man was playing at that moment. I don't think anyone would have even noticed if I had cleared it. They would have been too busy worshipping Pepsi Man. What is the accuracy of the triple P? Despite being a precise trick, I'm actually pretty consistent at it. It's why I was bold enough to even put it right before the end. The one day I even claimed it was a triple free jump and then proceeded to die to it that day. But the toughest part about it for me isn't even hitting the three jumps. It's having Mario not mess up his juggling in the air. Sometimes he just does not want to behave there and lets the P-switches do whatever they want. Has a sneeze ever caused you an eye? Funny you should ask that, actually. Sneezing has been responsible for every single death I've ever had. The clear was just the first time I managed to go a full 10 minutes without sneezing. How's it going since you beat Trials of Death? Going fine. Actually, going to be moving in a couple months. Not far, but moving nonetheless. Also, should be starting up at a job that I think I'm actually going to enjoy. All things considered, this was actually a really convenient time for me to beat Trials of Death, as otherwise streams probably would have been a little sporadic over the next couple months. What's the nicest message you've received since the clear? I I don't think I have a single particular message I would say was the nicest, and this is something I never thought I would say, but YouTube comments. Yes, some of the YouTube comments have actually been really nice. What games do you like to play that aren't Nintendo related if you play any of them? Hide and seek. Big fan of hide and seek. My dream game would be some virtual reality hide and seek game where the seeker is just some serial killer. I know that wasn't even the question, but yeah, hide and seek. Did you play any other games while doing Trials of Death? Plenty. I've been keeping up with a lot of games. I mean, the Switch didn't even exist when I started Trials of Death, so come to think of it, literally every game on the Switch is something I've played since starting Trials of Death. I mean, every game on Switch that I've played, not literally every game on the Switch. And certainly not just the Switch. I've been playing all kinds of other games. I remember a while ago when there was some article about me in the level, some random guy on Twitter quote tweeted it saying something along the lines of, I'm not part of the video games are a waste of time crowd, but my god, do something else, even if it's just other games. And once again, it's like literally nobody said I wasn't doing other things too. You just came to that conclusion on your own and then complained about it like a brainless moron. You always say that when you get to the end, it doesn't feel real. Do you think this helped you clear it by not panicking at the end and getting stressed? Absolutely, it definitely helped. I feel like I don't have anything to lose since I don't care if I have to keep playing the level a lot longer. That being said, nerves are still present, so it's always more difficult than it is in practice. How cool would it have been if you had cancer or a similar terminal illness and you beat the level just before you died? Like an epic and inspiring story. Not that cool. I mean, maybe if I was a fictional character, but no, I'm real. And at no point have I thought, oh man, I wish I had a terminal illness. Trials of Death is the name of the level, not the title of the journey. Do you feel satisfied with the reception and praise you've received for beating the level, or were you expecting more? Not just satisfied, but overwhelmed. Like, I know clearing it is a big deal, but sometimes I forget it's a big deal for everyone. Though, that being said, I can't help but look at some of the old Mario Maker levels that went viral and think, kinda deserve more views than those. But that's just how it goes. Did you stick to some schedule to keep your determination? Nope, never had any sort of schedule. A lot of my streams, at least in the last couple years, were in the late afternoon, but that wasn't so much of a schedule as it was a habit. Why was reaching the last screen called nigh? Slight misconception. Nigh doesn't mean the last section itself, it specifically means dying to the last section. And that didn't originate with this level, it had been sort of a Mario Maker trend since the early days. The origin being originally when a Japanese player famously shouted "Yatta" after clearing a hard level. I believe it was Hiroki. Yatta being Japanese for "I did it." So whenever people would beat their hard levels, it just came to be known as "Yatta." And then eventually, not long after, another Japanese player, Val, introduced us with another word, "Yatanai." I believe it's technically slang and not a real word, but in short, it meant the opposite. I didn't do it. And so if you died at the end of the level, it was known as a Nai. You would either get a Yata or you would get a Yatanai. So that's where the term Nai comes from. Now, a lot of people that weren't around for the early days didn't know about this, and with it not being as prevalent anymore, the meaning of it got lost, and People just thought it meant the end of the level. So often people would come in and say things like, "Good luck, Braden, let's get a 9 today," which basically comes off as, "Good luck, Braden, let's die at the end of the level today." And it's like, that's not quite the goal here, but yes, thank you. Did the doubters actually encourage you to play the level out of spite? How much of that was motivation? I could call it extra motivation, but really I was fully motivated just to do it anyway. I think some people have the misconception that I was so persistent just to prove people wrong, but no, it was going to happen one way or another. Turns out just a bunch of people volunteered themselves to be wrong. And from my perspective, I already knew they were wrong. I knew I was capable and knew I would keep going until I got it. Also, I feel like some people think I hate all the doubters, which is just completely not true. I mean, there's nothing morally wrong with thinking I wasn't going to complete it. If nothing else, they recognized how difficult it was. That being said, not all the doubters were the same. Like, if you came into my stream and told me to give up or something, then yeah, I probably don't like you. But in short, people doubting wasn't a driving force. It was just additional satisfaction in the end. Did you have anybody, fictional or not, that initially inspired you to push this game to the limits? Nah, I really just paved my own path. Though I like the inclusion of fictional in this question, and I can give a small side story answer in regards to that. So, cliche moment here where I get to set myself up as an anime protagonist, but there's the scene in the first season of One Punch Man where Saitama had just saved a city from a meteor, and not long after, he ends up in the midst of this crowd of people, and they all start loudly and collectively complaining about him and for him to give up being a hero. They just start chanting for him to give it up. Meanwhile, he's just standing there with his usual blank expression for a while until he finally snaps and yells that he's just doing it for fun because he wants to and starts telling them all to shut up. And it's like, wow, yeah, I've never punched a meteor before, but otherwise I can relate to this. And so I was inspired to tell people to shut up. I mean, I was already doing that on a regular basis, but I was inspired to tell people to shut up even more often. If you were to make an impossible level from scratch, how different would it look considering Trials of Death was a framework from 7 years ago? It's tough to imagine. I can't really answer anything definitively. I assume it would look completely different, but then again, making a full timer level kind of shifts the level into becoming very section based. I definitely am proud, though, of how I managed to involve the level over the frame of a 2015 outline, but yeah, I have no idea what it would look like otherwise. Which part of the level did you die the most on? That'd be the first section. Every single attempt made it at least that far, and it gave me a lot of chances to die to it. You might have intended to ask what I had the lowest consistency on, but I'm not sure, so I took the fun out of this question instead. Was the face reveal you did recently as nerve-wracking as the final walk to the axe in Trials of Death? That wasn't a face reveal. I've had my face out there on many different instances, and no matter how many times, people always seem to think it's the first time. Like, I bet a lot of people thought this video was a voice reveal when that's not the case either. But even if it had been my first time showing my face, why would I be nervous? I look great! What section of the level do you think helps it reach 9.5 minutes long? Well, collectively everything, but individually I think the parts where I reuse certain areas in different ways are the biggest things that help pull it off. At least for keeping everything within the confines of the level, but the length as well. The bomb lap room, where you have to go through the section 4 times, is probably the easiest example of that, and it's different each of the 4 times. You can easily make a section that you just loop multiple times over with it being the exact same each time, but I didn't want to do that. How many A presses were required to beat it? None, my control scheme wasn't set to using an A button. How fun did you really find it to be? I got asked that a lot over the years. It always felt like I was being asked in a skeptical tone, like, are you really having fun with this? And the short answer is yes, but it's almost harder to give a better explanation. It's like there's different kinds of fun when it comes to playing games. The most relatable being something like just playing through some random game, or Mario Party or Mario Kart, just anything like that. That's fun. But this clearly isn't like that. It's just a different kind of fun. Like when people speedrun a game over and over, it's a completely different kind of fun, but it's still an enjoyable and rewarding hobby. So it's that kind of fun. If you know, you know. Was there any song in your playlist you hated listening to, but kept it in because chat considered it a banger? No way, I'm the one in control. If anything, the opposite would be more applicable. No, Braden, we don't want to hear this Nightcore song. Nope, too bad. In fact, I'm putting it in the playlist the second time just because you complained. It's usually in a joking way, but I like messing with my audience like that. I'm just not one of those streamers that tries to please everyone, which, don't get me wrong, is often a good thing when streamers are like that, but my stream isn't always a democracy. A lot of times it's a dictatorship. Regarding the music thing, and this didn't happen a lot, but I hated when people would complain about songs in an obnoxious way. It's like, just mute it. You're in full control of that. Whenever that would come up, I would usually time them out in chat for 10 minutes, just the default timeout command thing, and usually they would get the hint from that. But I remember this one time after I did that, once their 10 minutes were up, they started talking like, "That was a rude thing you just did to me. I was one of the first people to subscribe to you, and I won't be returning." It's like, geez, sounds like you're doing me a favor. There was another time I remember when someone was going around complaining, saying, "Braden banned me from the stream just because I said something about his music." Meanwhile, it was actually no, that had nothing to do with it. I banned you because you were racist. What was your favorite part of the Clear video? Gonna go with the Clear. I don't know. I really liked all the celebration and stuff after, but then again, putting in those doubter messages was so incredibly satisfying. And for the record, what I showed in the video was less than half of what I actually had. Actually, quite a bit less. There were even some people I so generously spared because they eventually changed their ways and became believers. God, I sound like some kind of religious preacher. But yeah, I just know during the Clear video, when the doubter messages started rolling in, there had to have been some people nervously sweating and thinking, "Oh God, what did I say like 5 years ago?" Now, Snaggy at the very end of the video, I gave a special spotlight to. And that's because Snaggy's rude comments were the most personal. Unlike most of the others that would just come from random corners of the internet, Snaggy was actually another Mario Maker player. Now, I had heard of Snaggy before, but I never actually met him or anything, never interacted with him at any point, just knew him as another Kaizo player and maker. And so, seeing those messages from at the end of the video, you might think we had some sort of history, like were we rivals or something? Did we have some prior altercation? No, he was just spontaneously a jerk to me for no reason. And I came to learn that was pretty much his entire personality. He had messages where he would make fun of other players literally just for the way they looked. But one of the funniest things to me was when there used to be weekly Kaizo races. Every weekend for a really long time throughout the original Mario Maker, there would be a Kaizo race level that anyone could participate in. Anyone could sign up to be the designated maker as well. And the Kaizo Wiki had a whole page for each week showing what level was for the week every time. And this was a consistent thing for years. Not many weeks were skipped. Whenever there was a week with no race, that page had a footnote to explain why. And usually it was something like, "No race this week because it was a holiday," or "No race this week because some other event was happening." But as I was scrolling through, I saw this one footnote that completely stood out. It was, "No race this week because the maker threw a tantrum at the last moment." And I saw that and I just thought to myself, Snaggy? So, out of curiosity, I went back and looked at the old Mario Maker Discord and filtered the messages to the day of that week's race, and sure enough, Snaggy. Now, all these instances would have been one thing if he was just some young kid that still had some growing up to do. If that had been the case, I would have let him go, not put him at the end of the Clear video. But at the time of him sending those awful messages about me, he was 28 years old. So, you know what, Snaggy? If it's been your dream to perform at the circus, let me give you an audience. What advice do you have for people grinding for their own similar things? My advice would be to get to a point where you don't need advice. That sounded terrible. There, I hope I was helpful. But really, what I mean is to just manage your own expectations. If you like doing what you're doing, there's not much that needs to be said. If you want to keep going, keep going. If you want to take a break, take a break. And if people are saying rude things to you, just tell them to go jump off a cliff. How did your life change as you went through your journey, and could you give us a comparison on pre-Trials of Death Braden and post-Trials of Death Braden? You know, I think one of the biggest changes for early Trials of Death Braden and late Trials of Death Braden, and this is going to sound incredibly ironic, is that current Braden is less patient. And also, apparently he talks in third person. No idea when that started. But what I mean by less patient has nothing to do with the level. I'm talking about how I might respond to rude people. To bullies, because that's what they usually are. So, Actually, let's take a recent comment on my Clear video and use it as an example as to how pre-Trials of Death Braden and post-Trials of Death Braden might respond. So we have a comment here from Benjamin Ledru that says, I am so happy to have spent... Actually, wait. Let me give Benjamin a better voice. I am so happy to have spent the last 7 years with my family instead of a video game. Now, pre-Trials of Death Braden might have said something like, I don't know, that was mean. Why did you feel the need to say this, Benjamin? Why did I just slightly change my voice to represent myself? Could have just not changed it since it's supposed to be me. But yeah, that might have been the kind of thing I would have said. And with a bit more passive aggressiveness, that might still be the kind of thing post-Trials of Death Braden would say. But post-Trials of Death Braden also has these moments where he just snaps and goes, screw you, Benjamin. Your family probably doesn't even love you, so I guess that was 7 years wasted for them too. I mean, maybe not exactly that, but you get the idea. Sometimes post-Trials of Death Braden has just had enough. You might call it stooping to their level. I call it returning the serve. And you might have already figured this out about me based on every other question turning into some kind of rant, but hey, these rants are fun. Did you ever focus on the aesthetics of the level, or was it entirely pragmatic gameplay? I mean, a little bit. You can probably see where I did some extra design stuff on the side, but it wasn't something I cared all that much about. Just being a difficult level was the priority. Still, it wouldn't be all too uncommon for me to see people criticizing it. His level looks like trash. It's a big mess. Yeah, okay, thanks, Picasso. It's called Trials of Death. What do you expect it to look like, the entrance to a 5-star resort? Considering the level is called Trials of Death and you didn't die in your final attempt, it sounds to me like you failed the trials. How do you feel about this? You're looking at it the wrong way. That may have been the one run Mario didn't die on, but between sacrificed Yoshis and all the enemies, it was the run with the greatest amount of death. Alright, that was 100 questions. Surely that was everything you could have ever wanted to know, but if you had some question that wasn't answered, feel free to ask it and I might reply to it. But be careful about asking a question that was already answered in this video, because you might get met with people replying to you saying, haha, you already answered that one in the video. But yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for listening, except for you who just skipped to the very end to see what I would say here.